everybody, welcome. Good afternoon. Welcome to our first quarterly investor call. I'm Suzanne Willis, the Chief Development Officer here at Second Harvest Food Bank. My co-host for this meeting is Sierra Top, our Donor Relations Manager. This afternoon, we're going to be hearing about where we are now, 1 year after shelter in place. I know you will recognize our CEO, Willie Elliott McCrae. Willie has been with the food bank for over 40 years and is also serving in his second year as board chair for the California Association of Food Banks. This puts him in the forefront of combating hunger throughout our state for the past year. Joining Willie this afternoon is Josue Barajas, Chief Programs Officer. Josue's philosophy revolves around servant leadership. He demonstrates this by his commitment to building networks, diversity, and equity, and empowering the community to be the leaders they are. Josue oversees the CalFresh, agencies, nutrition program team that make up Second Harvest Food Bank's programs department. Just a little housekeeping for this call. We'll keep everyone muted to cut down on the background noise. The session will be recorded, and we'll be posting it to our YouTube channel by next week. To find our YouTube channel, you can always go to thefoodbank.org, scroll to the bottom of the page, and you'll see the YouTube link there, and just click that. Or it's the icon, not the link. Finally, if you have any questions, please do type them in the chat box. We should have some time at the end to answer some questions. Again, thank you for joining us tonight and for your support over this past year. Willie, take it away. Willie, I think you're muted.
Yeah, well, you told me you were muting me. There you go. No, I just was saying thank you, Suzanne, and so really happy that all of you were able to join us today. And I'm sure you all remember 1 year ago on March 16th when our county went into lockdown and our local unemployment tripled overnight. One of the things that we saw quickly in the community was there was a tremendous amount of fear that the local food banks were going to run out of food. One day, our community food hotline received over 1,600 calls from folks desperately worried about running out of food. And in the same way that the shelves in grocery stores emptied overnight, families who lost their jobs were also freaking out. Second Harvest made a very public commitment on TV and elsewhere that we had enough food and that we would do whatever it takes to have the food needed for the duration of the crisis. This allowed the community to feel that they did not need to fill their garages, and that in and of itself helped ensure enough food for all. As you know, scarcity mentality leads to hoarding and leads to hunger, and abundance is a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's the point of the miracle of the 5 loaves and 2 fish, feeding 5,000 people. When everyone shares, there is enough for all. Not only did we have a solid inventory in our food in our warehouse from day one, but also the County of Santa Cruz went to bat for FEMA funding to purchase additional food supplies to help sustain our food inventory levels. And we were so relieved. We made promises, we had faith that they were going to happen, and we were relieved that things were coming through. 30% of those coming for food had never sought food assistance before. Hard to imagine. They just did not, and they did not know where to find a nutrition home. Therefore, we set up the large Friday drive-through distributions, alternating at the fairgrounds and the boardwalk, to make it easier for the community to find food. Congressman Jimmy Panetta was able to quickly secure the services of a National Guard unit to help pack and distribute twice as much food to twice as many people overnight, over 1 million pounds of food a month. And we have had so many great distribution partners. 9 of our neighborhood food pantries began distributing twice as much food, and 4 of our neighborhood food pantries increased their distributions more than 5 times. And then on top of all that, as you remember, on August 16th, Santa Cruz County was struck by the lightning fires, which burned for 38 days and forced as many as 75,000 people to evacuate. Fortunately, we received a grant through the Community Foundation to buy food for people without kitchens. And some families stayed in evacuation centers, some in their cars, some couch surfed, others stayed with friends, some in local hotels. It was and continues to be very difficult for these families who are trying to rebuild their lives in their homes and to not go hungry in the process. Doubling the amount of food for this last year, as you can imagine, was only possible by our strong network of donor investors, and that is each and every one of you. We have been able to hire temp staff to buy and distribute food, to rent large refrigerated trailers, and to do everything else that was needed to double our level of food bank services this past year. Thank you. And now I'd like to ask Josue to do a deeper dive into how we met these challenges.
Thank you for that, Willie. So I'm going to begin by sharing a story. Martha began to be a regular participant at our mass distribution site at the fairgrounds. She began to show up with her father in the passenger seat and her 2 kids in the back. She would mention that coming to the food distribution was a huge help for her and her family, as it reassured her that she was getting the nutritious, healthy food that she needed in order to prepare for her kids and for her dad, who was diagnosed with diabetes, high cholesterol, and was obese. After her various times that she would continue to utilize our services, we began to notice that she stopped coming. And when she did come back, we took the liberty of telling her, "Hey, what happened? Where were you?" And it was because of that that she shared her story and shared that her father was no longer with us, that her father had passed away with COVID, but that she continued to come out to our Friday distributions to continue to feed her kids healthy, nutritious meals with the food we provided. And now I'm going to share how you have helped Martha and so many more. When Shelter in Place began, the Community Foundation gave Second Harvest Food Bank its first gift ever. In April, we saw KSBW run a virtual telethon, a day of help and hope, to generate support for our Central Coast food banks, which includes Second Harvest Food Bank. Throughout the year, we received so many generous donations from the community, such as masks, words of encouragement, recognition for all of hard work, water, envelopes full of money and checks, food, and so much more. So thank you for that. As the year went by, we all know that the demand for the food continued to go. And when November hit, we started off with our first ever virtual holiday food drive. And that's where we really saw the community come together to help the neighbors in need. We were nervous, I'm not gonna lie, that we were not going to meet our goal. But we not only met it, we exceeded it, and we got 5.5 million meals. So thank you for that. And again, the community not only donated money and food, but they also donated time. And week after week, we began to see people come out to volunteer at our sites and our weekly mass distributions. And once we transferred over to this mass distribution sites, we really saw that increase for volunteer help. And that's how we were able to manage to serve 800 to 3,000 households weekly. And with that, we continued to distribute our food, and we had our challenges and we had our shifts. We went from serving an average of 1,000 households to 4,000 households weekly. Wow, we would have never expected that. And because of those CDC guidelines, we had to move and say goodbye to our volunteers in the warehouse and reduce the size of our volunteers out in the sites. We also had to reduce from going to our famous farmers market style food and our bulk items that we would send out to our agencies and go to pre-packaged and pre-backed boxes in order to limit less contact. One of our sites even saw a huge increase in the households they served. They went from serving 30 households to serving over 300 households within the span of 2 weeks. We also want to recognize that without the help of our partnerships in our local school districts, such as Pajaro Valley, SoCal, and Live Oak School District, we would have not been able to push out so much food like we did. So thank you so much for all of that support. And I want to share one last story, Steve's story. Steve, like many, lost his job at the beginning of the pandemic. But what was different for him was that as he continued to utilize the unemployment services. When August hit, he and his family were dislocated from his home, and he quickly did not know where to go. And out of embarrassment or out of shame, we saw him drive in and pull into our mass distribution at the boardwalk and say, "Excuse me, how am I to utilize the services?" And so we gladly helped him. We gladly guided him into the services that we did. And he was not only greeted by our volunteers, he was also greeted by one of our CalFresh representatives. That CalFresh representative, after he got all of his food, all of his nutritious food, such as fresh produce, dry goods, dairy items, was pulled over to the side. They helped him fill out CalFresh. So he not only took $100 worth of fresh produce and grocery items, he also drove away with $360 that he would then continue to serve and provide for his family with nutritious meals. So honestly, we truly could not have done what we did this year without your support. So thank you for everything you've done. And now I'm going to ask Willie to continue to talk about the transition from emergency response to community recovery. Thank you. Willie, you are on mute.
Yes.
Mute again. There you go. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. This Zoom, still trying to get used to it. So I just wanted to say thank you, Josue, for those stories and for giving us a snapshot of the day in the life. As you all know, Second Harvest has been involved in many major relief efforts over the years. In addition to being at the forefront of the major relief work for the 1982 flood, we are also involved in the 1989 quake, the 1995 flood, the 2007 Great Recession, and now the 2020 pandemic recession. And we've learned many things over the years. The first thing is the importance of kicking into high gear as quickly as possible and without hesitation. Second, that there are always two crucial stages to this work: the immediate emergency response phase, which typically lasts weeks or months, and in this case, a little bit over a year. And then there is the community recovery phase, which typically lasts 2 to 3 years. And I know that we're also very encouraged to see businesses like the Boardwalk and the Fairgrounds and so many others begin to reopen, and to see a light at the end of the COVID tunnel. And we do know that hundreds of local businesses have closed in our community, and that it will take several years for local employment and food security to recover to pre-pandemic levels. Our board and staff is hard at work at a 3-year strategic plan to fulfill our promise to provide the level of food bank services needed as this pandemic recession unwinds over the next few years. Our first focus is strengthening our network of neighborhood-based, volunteer-driven food pantries and nutrition homes. Before the pandemic, hundreds of volunteers showed up every week at dozens of locations throughout Santa Cruz County to help pack and distribute food to our neighbors and families. We know that community ownership and partnership is a sustainable model that will be able to provide our community with the food and support needed while people rebuild their lives. And now with the Boardwalk reopening, we are pivoting back to the neighborhood food pantry model in North County as of May 1st. In South County, we will be strengthening our neighborhood food distribution network over the next 6 months to build the ongoing additional 40 to 60% capacity needed. In our strategic planning process, we're trying to answer a number of questions, including how do we drive greater efficiency, effectiveness, and sustainability through technology? How can we continue to deepen our private-public partnerships to accelerate community impact? How can we advance equity and meaningful policy change in our work? As we know, the pandemic has laid bare how broken the system has been for so many families struggling to make ends meet. They have been hit twice as hard by the pandemic and the resulting recession. No one wants to go back to the old normal. How can we work together to truly help our families thrive and move forward? That is the question. You have successfully helped us meet each challenge this past year, and together we'll continue to meet these challenges. So thank you so very much for all your support and for all your partnership.
All right, so thank you so much, Willie and Josue, for the wonderful presentation. That wraps up the bulk of our presentation, and we're going to jump into questions now. So we have some in the chat, and then if more questions come up for you as we're answering them, please just continue to put them in the chat and we will try to get through as many as possible. So Suzanne, you can go ahead with the first question.
Yes, our first question is, I'm curious what your crystal ball, that's in quotes, thinks the need will be this year and next. What are you planning for and what the biggest needs are?
You know, what our crystal ball says is, you know, and then, like I said, South County, we're looking at probably 40 to 60% increased need over the next 18 months or so. North County, we're looking probably closer to 30 to 40% increased needs. So, you know, our biggest challenges are, you know, continuing to bring in the food, to really, it's to really, as we talked about, strengthen our neighborhood food pantry network, make sure that there's strong volunteers there. We're hoping over time that the neighborhood food pantries can start doing more of the packing, so we don't have to pack, you know, 30,000 boxes a month at the warehouse. That's taken, you know, a large crew of National Guard and manpower. Temps, National Guard will be terming out at the end of September, you know, so really just trying to figure out, you know, how we kind of maintain that level of production. One of the things that we're really looking at also is, as you can imagine, when your business doubles overnight and looks like it's going to be at a significantly increased level for the next at least 3 years, you really have to look at your technology, your processes, your systems, and just get tooled up for working at a whole different level.
Absolutely. We have another question. What is your plan for senior volunteers to now get back re-involved in, given that we are now vaccinated?
That's a really good question. And, you know, one of the things that we're really pleased with is that, you know, the county has really prioritized senior volunteers who work with food pantries, you know, and so we've been strongly encouraging our volunteers to get vaccinated so that they can start to return, you know, both to volunteering at the warehouse and then volunteering, you know, at all the various distributions, whether it be, you know, housing projects, senior centers, et cetera. So we're just delighted that we don't have the same kind of safety concerns that we did. I mean, just one example, you know, Twin Lakes for People's Pantry for years has really been staffed by, you know, a very strong cohort of senior volunteers. And when shelter in place hit, they really had to say, you know, to the volunteers, you know, for your own health and safety, you know, we need you to step back for a while and recruit another cohort. And so we're delighted to be able to re-engage those senior volunteers at this point as we, you know, become more and more vaccinated and as the volunteers are vaccinated.
The other thing, if I can just jump in a little bit on that, we don't quite have the space physically in our warehouse right now to be opening up our regular volunteers, the Monday through Friday community volunteers that we have. We're working towards that. We're getting there. But we do now every other Saturday have a volunteer shift at our facilities, and anybody is welcome to join, where we have eliminated the age restrictions on there. Previously, if you were over 60 or under 13, we weren't having you come into our facilities, but now those individuals can. Obviously, we still have the minimum age restriction of 7 years old because that's pretty darn little, but so we are slowly opening back up our volunteering programs to so many people. I'm not seeing any other questions. We did get a lovely message from Stacy Garcia. Thank you for the incredible work you've done during this pandemic. So many in our community wouldn't have gotten through this past year without you, your team, and your volunteers. Thank you. Well, thank you, Stacy. We honestly could not have done that without your support as well. So we really appreciate it. Are there any other questions? If you wanted to type a question in the chat box, otherwise, I'm not seeing anything. Sierra, do you want to just, oh, wait, what kinds of technology improvements are you looking to make?
So it's called ERP, it's Enterprise Resource Planning tool that we have. It's our central accounting and inventory system that we have currently is about 10 years old. And we're really looking at implementing a newer version that can support more effective online ordering. Most of our agencies order online, and then we pick their orders and deliver them. Right now, our processes are pretty cumbersome. And the other thing that we've discovered are some people who are really good at teaching us how to use the software we have and how to really integrate that software with more effective processes. So, we've had a software which we call Series, in Food Bank world, it's Microsoft Dynamics. And, what we've discovered is not only has it become a little bit aged, but, it hasn't really been fully implemented. People haven't really fully understood what's necessary. So, we're working with somebody who says, my job is not to sell software, it's to teach people how to drive cars, and so that's what we're trying to do. Both is upgrade and up-level our software, as well as just become much more effective users of it. So thanks.
Excellent. We got a couple more questions coming through. Josue, this one's for you if you want to unmute yourself. It is, hang on, where did it go? What is Second Harvest doing related to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging moving forward?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So Second Harvest right now is in the works of hiring a consultant to really start looking at the work that we do here within the organization, whether it's diversifying our board, whether it's diversifying our staff, or working with our current staff to create more of a diverse culture and a more belonging culture. And it's also looking at our stakeholders and the participants that we serve, and really making sure that their voice is being heard, and that Second Harvest is doing the best that we can do, that we really are hitting all of the people that are out there that need to utilize our services, or that have never heard about our services, and invite them to come in and utilize the services, or tell a neighbor to start using Second Harvest. So that's what we're trying to do moving forward. And in terms of belonging, we're trying to just make sure that everybody's feeling belonged, and that our sites, they're treated with respect, they're treated with the highest integrity, and that everybody continues to come back to really to utilize our services, and to make sure that they're getting their needs met with our food. So thank you for that question.
Excellent. Willie, another one for you. This is kind of a two-part question feeding off of each other. Are you assured that the grants from the Community Foundation and other groups are for 1 or more years? The question really is, do we have multi-year grants coming in? And then on top of that, sort of the second half of that is, can you tell us a bit more about your financial situation and the needs you have going forward?
Yeah, no, those are both great questions, Greta and Donna. And that's really the piece that we're trying to get our arms around, is because, we're looking at, responding to Ralph's question earlier, probably countywide, maintaining a level of food bank services on average of 30-40%, higher than pre-pandemic levels, for the next 3 years as the pandemic recession unwinds. And so as we are doing our strategic planning, our business planning, it's a really good question, which is how do we do the long-term financial planning around that to be able to do that, so we have some multi-year grants that have come in, and so we certainly have a base of that, but it's also one of the questions that I think the Board of Trustees and Finance Committee and staff are really trying to look at is, how do we make sure there, again, as we talked about earlier, that we fulfill our promise to the community to be there for the duration of this crisis. So, the community has been strong and supportive, and generous, so we feel like as we move into this next phase, we're walking in with some level of resources and some level of multi-year commitment. And, we will need to continue to be aggressive, if you will, to really, work with our partners, whether they be foundations or businesses or individuals, to make sure that, families get, their lives back on track. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it answers my question. Thanks, Willie.
Great.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. All right, we are just about out of time. Sierra, do you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, so thank you everyone for those really wonderful questions. And I'm going to transition now to next steps, but please, if you have additional questions, my contact information is on this slide below. And then most of you, I think, received an email from me with a Zoom link earlier today, so you can always reply directly to that message as well. But for next steps, you'll be receiving a follow-up email. And like we said, we are recording this session, and we can also share the slides and some relevant materials that will go along with what we talked about today. And then there's also going to be a really quick survey in there. I know there's always tons of surveys, but it'll be really helpful for us. We want these calls to be for you and a really valuable use of your time. So your feedback will really help us in planning future calls. It'll just be a couple questions. It should take a minute or two, but and then, like we said, we're going to be doing these calls quarterly. So we'll be working on setting up the next call for sometime in July. So keep an eye out for that. And thank you so much for your continuous support this last year and for taking the time out of your day to join us. And we are really excited for this series and to share all this with you. So thank you all so much and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody. Thank you. We'll
Thank
see
you.
you all soon, if not before July.
Thank
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.